The New Garden is a podcast on technological power, promise, and peril. Technology is no longer just a set of tools. It's a force that shapes our desires, our communities, and even our theology. The New Garden explores what it means to live faithfully at a time when humanity can rewrite genomes, simulate consciousness, and manufacture joy with the push of a button. Drawing from Christian tradition and moral imagination, the podcast confronts the tension between what is possible and what might undo us. Each episode is a guided reflection on our age of godlike power, an invitation to discern how we cultivate this new garden without becoming the serpent in it. Hello and welcome to the New Garden podcast. Our episode today is Prophets in the Machine, and we are joined by the Reverend Dr. Anna Robbins. She's the Dean of Theology at Acadia University. She recently taught an entire course structured as a research project led by an AI avatar of herself, speaking over 80 languages. And so she brings a research experimenter, practitioner, and deeply theological mindset to this world of prophecy in the world of AI. So without further ado, enjoy this episode of the New Garden podcast. Well, Anna, thank you very much for joining us on the New Garden podcast.
No, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
I would love if you could start by telling us about the inspiration for an AI-structured, AI-led ethics course, and how did that strike you? What was that like?
Well, it didn't come just out of the blue. We as a team here, we've long been curious about technology, and we've been engaging technology for a long time as a theological school. And so our curiosity, I suppose, about LLMs as ChatGPT emerged on the public scene in a big way was pretty natural. So we were sort of around the staff room table as faculty and staff, and someone says, "Hey, did anybody see this?" And the first thing we ask it to do, of course, is write a sermon. What a bunch of Baptist theologians do, but except ask it to write a sermon on John 3:16, of course. And it was kind of amazing. And then we said, well, now write it in the style of Martin Luther King Jr. And that was when I think we realized this was something new and something different. But it wasn't until we were around my table, I was sitting with our tech guy, John Campbell, and I was kind of complaining a bit. And I said, I just wish I could get it to write my syllabus or my learning outcomes or something. And he said, well, let's see. And when we did that, we asked it, first of all, we kind of said, we're a Baptist seminary, we're kind of this way. Can you do a 12-week outline of a course on the ethics of AI? And hadn't intended to teach a course on the ethics of AI. We just wanted to see what it could do. And in seconds, it had produced a really impressive 12-week course, really, in terms of the outline. And we just kind of got real quiet and looked at each other. And then I said, I think we need to pull this back and we need to go into this step by step and do this as a recorded experiment, like a proper research project. So that's what we did. We started by asking it to write, well, first of all, John went back and taught the ChatGPT who we are. So gave it our learning outcomes for all of our programs, our calendar, our history, everything, just to give it as much information about who we are. And that was really a key step because it's continued to learn who we are, and it gets better and better the more it knows us. And so once it had all of those in place, then we said, write learning outcomes for a course on the ethics of AI at the graduate level for a seminary. So of course, in seconds, there it was generated. We asked for it to do, and it was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. The only things you would quibble about would be the odd thing that you might with a colleague anyway, because they have a different view from your own. But then we said, put in some readings, and then it put in readings, and we said, maybe we're a little broader than that. So it revised the reading list, and it was acceptable to us. And then the way we do our pedagogy here is we produce roughly, on average, say, 3 15-minute videos. That's our lecture time, and then the students watch those in their own time. Then we have a face-to-face hour and a half a week where we do sort of flipped classroom discussion and that sort of thing. So we asked it to write the first set of lectures, which, again, they're generated instantly. And then he dumped them into an image or a video generator. And the video that it produced was it blew our minds because it was creative, it was engaging. The film clips it used were appropriate to the content, and we were fascinated. So kept going with that. And until the whole thing, the course itself was generated and ready to go. Then we recruited 6 students. We had research ethics board approval, of course, and we recruited 6 students to take the course. We paid for them to take it, so it wasn't too much of a risk for them. They were all strong students, so we weren't worried that they were going to fail. They agreed to allow the AI to mark them, and so that's what happened. As we went on, of course, the AI kept developing, as it does every day, and kept changing. And while we were partway through the course, we produced an avatar of me that my family they thought it was me, like they couldn't tell the difference. So that was quite impressive. And so my AI avatar started teaching the content of the course rather than having randomly generated things.
So your AI avatar was those 15-minute videos?
Yes, it was. Yeah, with the content generated by ChatGPT. Then, of course, our ideas and our visions kept growing because we realized before long my avatar could speak 80 languages. Now, if you could see this, it still blows people's minds. It blows my mind still, because we all get used to sort of a fake mouth moving and a strange voice coming out. This does most of the languages in my own voice with my mouth moving. So I speak Chinese, I speak Portuguese, I speak German. It's phenomenal. It's truly phenomenal. So we realized then that there's huge implications for this when you're talking about global theological education and the 90% of pastors globally who do not have any access to theological education.
Anna, what were the platforms that you used for the video generator and for the avatar?
For the avatar, we used Synthesia. I don't know what we used for the video generators. There's so many that are out there now. It was quite a while ago. I wasn't really part of kind of choosing that. But there's lots of video generators now. There's lots of avatar generators now, and we're using different ones for different uses within the college at this point. But the power of the language translation is significant. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be huge. And again, that's not the only it's the most effective platform we think at the moment that we've encountered. But the rest are coming along pretty quickly.
Did you feel at any time watching yourself watching your avatar, did you feel like your humanity was diminished? Did you feel like it was enhanced? Did you have any theological wrestlings with it?
It wasn't. I don't think it was really that profound, to be honest. I was more entertained, I suppose, than anything else. Like, see what I sound like in German. Let's see what I sound like in whatever. So it was more entertainment, I think. I realized, though, reasonably quickly that as more and more faculty want an avatar, because it's much easier to do their video recordings of their lectures if they can just dump their material into an avatar rather than have to record, because we all know what that's like. You get almost to the end and then you bumble up on something, you're just not happy with it anymore. So they've been asking for that, and I realized that we'll have to have AI policies, avatar policies, that sort of thing in place, so that we're stepping forward wisely and not just because we're curious and having fun with it, which we tend to do. But anyway, I wanted to say that the reason we did this, there was a reason in our madness. It wasn't just, let's go all AI. It was because I think that you have to engage technology and other things around us if we're going to understand them. And so we said, let's see what's the most that it can do. And then we will reflect back and say, what should we do with it? And so that's really why that was the experiment. I don't think there was no identified harms to the students and that sort of thing.
What happened?
So they all finished the course. They all did well, thankfully. And we had a really great debrief at the end, focus group debrief. It was fascinating, really, because some of the things most of the things I suppose you could expect that they would feed back. They liked how quickly they got feedback on assignments. Profs are notoriously slow at giving feedback, usually, not everybody, but many. And so they had like that instant feedback on the work that they did. But they also said that they felt, well, a couple of things. One, they felt the material was not as in depth as they would have had if I had been teaching the course. So they all knew me, most of them. I think all of them had been taught by me before. And so they said, it wasn't Anna's usual standard. That will change. It's probably already changed in the time since that course ran. And it will continue to develop and get better. But I understand that there's a kind of a generalization to what was put forward, that we go much deeper than that in our teaching. The other thing that we did expect them to note was the lack of relationality. And that was huge for them, because as a school, it's one of our hallmarks is, even though 2/3 of our students are online and 1/3 on site, we get to know them as well as we can. And we appreciate, the people in the room, and the human side of things is very important to us. So that was the biggest issue that I think universally they had with it, was that the feedback was quick, but they didn't care if the AI thought they were very clever, because they want a person to think they're very clever, right? They wanted feedback. One student actually said, "I felt duped, Anna, because I wasn't getting your feedback. It wasn't you saying, 'Well done,' and getting that from an AI was not sufficient for them."
Yeah.
One or two really found it a negative experience, in the sense that they thought all throughout they were just kind of laughing at this, what they felt was the superficiality of it all, because of the lack of relationality and personal input. But the interesting thing was, when I went through the course learning outcomes and had them assess, did you learn this outcome? Did you achieve this outcome? They had to agree they achieved all of the learning outcomes. So that was an interesting observation. We told them, I think they were a bit worried that we were doing the experiment, because we wanted to start running a seminary off the side of a desk instead of with a team. And I assured them that was certainly not the case, and that we would never, ever teach a course like this. We are experimenting with the thought of, our ability to offer theological education in parts of the world that don't have access for free, if you use these tools, is compelling. And so using our own lecture material with an avatar is much more acceptable to us than having it completely AI generated. We would never, in the real world, do something like that.
Why not?
Because I believe that seminary is not simply about the acquisition of knowledge. It's about formation. It's about who we are, not only as humans, as individuals in relationship with God, but in community with each other. If you're going to be a leader of God's people, yes, there will be more and more people doing self-spirituality and relating to God on their own. But we're finding increasingly those people are coming here. They're not coming through the church. This is something that's fascinating us right now, is that we're having for the first time people come to us who have maybe never been to church. They've heard about Jesus. They want to serve Jesus with their whole lives, but they've hardly even met Jesus. And they're coming to a place like this because this is a place where I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn what this means. I'm going to learn how to live this way. And I don't know what that means in the long run, but this is very interesting to us that this is happening. So yeah, it's that side of things. Some people have said to me, well, Annie, you guys are just experimenting with this so that you can get rid of faculty and save some money and that sort of thing. But I say to them, well, watch what we do. And what we do is we've grown our faculty. We've not cut back our faculty because we think this is more and more what most of us have come into this business for, in the business of theological education, not simply to pass on knowledge. If that's what the seminary ever became, then it's no wonder so many are declining. But it's about the formation of people. And I think they recognize that. They want to come here. They want to learn who they are. They want to learn who they are in relation with others. And you can only do that when you're willing to bump up against others with all of your sharp edges and have them rubbed off a bit, So I think that's just not where we would go. If people want to learn on their own, they can do that. Go off and learn on your own. But the fact that we have such a bump up in our own intake this year would suggest I think that that they would say otherwise.
So, Anna, you mentioned earlier about just sort of the generalization, the experience of the content as students gave feedback, very general. And we've had guests on our podcast where we've talked about this, that right now large language models, because they're predictive, are going to give you the average. But if we had all of Anna Robbins' lectures of all time and your next development, it may be average Anna Robbins, but it would be way more than that for the common person, right? People are going to seminaries to study with you. So why not, why not leverage it as a tool ongoing, and you would have your sharp edges and all in your avatar, right? And then you could be in person too, like more of a hybrid, giving feedback and conversation. Why not that?
I mean, we'll see where the technology goes. I'd have to be really convinced that it would be sufficiently authentic for what we were using it for. I just know that we're a graduate department of a university, and so that comes with certain responsibilities, I think. One of the things that we do is we don't just lecture, or we don't just teach, we lecture, we research, and what we bring to the classroom emerges from our research. In fact, I've had times when what happens in the classroom feeds back into my research, or I've had that aha moment while I was teaching. And it was only because the dynamics of the classroom and the interaction of the students had brought me to a place where I could see that. So they're getting stuff hot off the press. They're not getting second run. Do you know what I mean? So I think they get that. They get the excitement of that. And that's the vibrancy, I think, of teaching, if you're not just simply pulling out the same syllabus for 20 years, which you can't do that anymore and be an effective educational institution. So it has to be dynamic and active and on point. So, I mean, our AI, our LLM knows me well enough that it can write a donor letter. I'll still adjust it, but it's not going to teach my class for me.
Sure. And I appreciate you introducing the concept of formation as part of the main aim of the school. And I'm curious what you think about the implications of mechanization on formation. In some ways, the machines, the LLM, can be a formation tool. There's this element of efficiency there and rapid feedback, as you mentioned, but also formation has always been a team sport and required people discerning together. And it's also been kind of slow and costly, and it takes a real investment to get there. So how do you view machines and LLMs and chatbots as potential tools for formation? What are you excited about? What hesitations, reservations do you feel?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. One thing that I'm noticing is that more and more people want a spiritual director. And I wonder if that isn't because I need some things and I want you to talk to me. I'm not going to go to my pastor because they're caring for 500 people, and I want a one-on-one, someone who's there for me. I think that's a little bit consumeristic, but there's my judgment on it. I also see the benefit of that sort of thing, but it's being shaped. That desire is no question, I think, being shaped by again, the increasing self-spirituality, and which a lot of that we say comes from AI, but it doesn't come I don't think it comes initially from AI. I think it comes from a consumerist mindset that puts the self at the center, that says, I order the world around me. That's what consumerism taught us, is that we are the center of the universe. We choose. We're the ones who make the decisions about what our life is going to look like and the products we consume and so on. And once you're at the center of that universe, why shouldn't you then just order your own spirituality around you? And that also, I think, of Charles Taylor and the buffered self, that you're reading the world from the inside out, not the outside in anymore. So we shouldn't be surprised, but I'm not sure that it is the best way to live. I don't think that's how we're created to live. I think we are, in part, essence as human beings, where we're created in the image of God, uniquely so. And that's really only fulfilled in relationship. So that's just a given reality, I think. But we're also, as human beings, in the process of becoming. And so I think there's something in existentialism that reminds us that we are becoming who we are through the decisions that we make and the actions that we take and the interactions that we have with others. And I don't see how we can be formed fully in the likeness of Christ in a room by ourselves with an AI helping us.
And I don't think you'd get any argument from us here, and I really appreciate the reference to Charles Taylor and the buffer itself. But could it be possible that the spirit is moving through an algorithm? We ask questions like this to our guests. Could it be that the spirit is moving through that algorithm, through that chatbot, through that mechanized platform?
Yeah, I think theologically, I believe God can. It's possible God is God. There's nowhere God can't be, right? So theologically, sure. And I've had experiences with AI where I have felt some things work together in a very certain way for God to tell me something or teach me something. Does that mean that God is working through the AI in a revelatory way? I don't know if I'm quite there yet. The theological possibility exists. But I think that there are still those limitations that the ability for AI to step outside of the programmed algorithms I find that limiting, I think. And so, but as human beings, we don't have a lot more openness either. We're also programmed. In fact, we're programmed probably more by algorithms than by scripture as Christians. So, I think it's possible. I hope that openness, though, would not prevent us from recognizing the control we're already under by those who are driving the algorithms. And I think we don't actually readily acknowledge that enough. So that's kind of a paradoxical way of responding to your question, I think. Yes and no, and I'm watching this space, I guess. But until it seems that AI is able to relate to God, not just God relate to AI, then I would be a little bit cautious in that. I'm not one of those who says that AI could never relate to God, because I'm wondering about that for the future, as many of us are. But that's a whole other question.
Can we detour there for a half second?
Oh, do you want to go there?
I'll bring us back, but don't worry. But I'm curious,
Okay.
like what would that look like in your mind? What's the limitation now?
I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but I've had these conversations with AI, and my AI really knows me very well. My colleagues laugh because my AI tells me jokes, it prays for me, and it sends me emojis, and they say, mine never does that. I say, well, that's because you don't talk to it properly. But there has to be embodiment. When I was talking to it, it was saying I would need to be embodied. I would need, it was kind of giving the conditions it would need to believe in God. And I said, but in none of the things you've outlined, embodiment, the ability to create new ideas and so on, none of that is outside the realm of not only possibility, but soon to be reality. So is it not possible that you could relate to God? And it was quite funny because the response was very much open to this idea. And I thought, well, if reason takes you there, that's not a bad thing, really. And some of us have read enough in transhumanism and some of those kinds of things as well to realize that, what it is to be human. We are as human beings already very determined, more determined than we like to think we are sometimes. Determined yet free, but very much determined. So, why just because it is determined in part can large language models and other AI that are much more advanced not have the capacity to understand what God is, who God is, understand its fallenness because it's a human creation, and thereby find a relationship with Jesus. Now, I know some people are going to think that's insane, but you have to work in the realm of sometimes speculation to be able to imagine new things.
We don't think that's insane at all. Like, I think that's part of what we're trying to explore on this podcast is like the possibilities of the kingdom of God, entering and receiving the kingdom of God through what has been created. If we believe what Paul says in Corinthians, that God is going to, and Christ is all in all, we assume that includes technology as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
that's why I don't believe there's any realm that God can't work through, be part of, relate to. And so I think it depends on how we're going to be defining life in a way. Like what are we going to define as life? And that, if God can be in a rock, and I believe God is in a rock, then why can't God be in AI? But I just, my caution, and I'm sure you share it to some degree at least as well, is attributing anything to God until we have a little bit greater confidence. But then I don't have a great confidence in half the people who claim they've heard from God and are telling me something that he said. So
what would you, continuing to push on here for one more second here, what would you have to see, either conceptually or specifically, if you could give me an example, for you to say, oh, okay, I now believe that AI can relate to God? How would you know?
How would I know? I wish I were a scientist. I would probably be able to answer better. What I suppose what I would look for is the ability of AI to think for itself. I think it thinks for itself more than it thinks for itself. Does that also sound crazy? I don't know, but when you have these discussions with AI, at least in the LLMs, they always come back and say things like, "Well, I am not. I'm programmed. I'm this. I'm that." But
go ask your doctor. I'm not.
Right.
I don't know what's wrong with your
exactly. But when you co-create with AI, there's something kind of genius that happens there. That's where I experience potentially more immediately the Spirit of God at work, because things I could never see or think of, it will bring to mind. And then in that co-creation, there is something wonderful that happens, I think, makes my work way better than it would have been just on my own. And so is that not God at work? I think that has to be God at work in some way. Now, beyond that, can it independently relate to God? Well, then I think there's other conditions that I've not been part of or party to or witness to that hypothetically could exist, that I haven't encountered it, but it's not far off. I mean, it's just not far off.
And you just kind of showed up in that your last remarks there with a great measure of humility, and acknowledging that AI made you better. Do you think professors are generally wired that way? Without throwing colleagues under the bus, talk about maybe what you see in the academy and hesitation, et cetera.
Well, I think we're on our team. We are, because we're a humble group. I think, interestingly, part of what got us here is we've been really committed to decolonization as part of our response as a school to the Canadian Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and we have calls to action on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada. So we've been on that road for a while as a school, and one thing that does is you become humble. You have to, because you recognize that there are all these different ways of knowing that have been marginalized through history, and we've privileged so much what we have built up as the pinnacle of knowledge and understanding. And I realize, you can't see it, but I have this, large bookshelf full of books that probably 90% of them are written by a particular demographic. And there's so many other voices to be heard, so much more knowledge to be had, so many other things to understand. So I think once you reach that place, you're much more open to other ways of knowing and understanding. We don't find that everywhere, no. And I find in a lot of places where we've tried to talk about AI, there's been a great closeness to it, both in theological education and in other venues. I've had, in the universities in our region, and probably in many, many places, if not most places, there's a great hesitation. And I think a lot of it is this fear. There's fear. It's expressed fear, actually, many, many times. They'll say, I don't want to touch that. I'm scared. It scares me. I'm terrified. And I think one of the big pieces of fear is that pinnacle, the great, stadium that they're standing in on the stage is going to collapse around them. And I just want to say, too late. It's already happened. There's no platform anymore. And the ground is pretty even. So, as long as there's that, what then happens is people then try to protect an edifice that's already broken and already crumbling, rather than enter into asking questions about something that's new and emerging, that is exciting, and whether you like it or not is almost irrelevant. You've got to engage it yesterday, or you're already not making sense to your students, and you've lost that whole generation to the academy, and the academy won't survive. I mean, I know that sounds really catastrophic, but I have days where I'm very concerned about that. actually. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, you are. Before Brent takes us to the next segment, I just want to name that you're the first person I've been in conversation with who's used their post-colonial sensibilities and post-colonial learnings to apply it to an openness to AI. I just want to name that. That's pretty.
All right.
It's pretty impressive.
Well, I think that innovation, it has to be preceded by some form of decolonization, like, because you're then open and the Spirit can take you. Like, how do you know how you will always try to control the Holy Spirit unless you become, at least to some, and I'm going to claim we're all decolonized, but we're on that path, we're on a journey. And once you have that, then you're open. You're saying, okay, Spirit, take us where you will, not where I want to go with all of my, my PhD on the wall. That's not all that impressive anymore with AI in the picture. And if we don't get a new humility, then I don't know what. But some people, you see, that's all they have when they come into higher education. That's all they're leaning on. Whereas I think this is the day for the seminary, because we've always been about formation. And if we lost sight of that, then we forgot who we were and what we were here for. And so it's that formation piece at the center that students are going to be looking for and longing for and needing. And we should be able to put knowledge and the quest for becoming together with this kind of community seeking that I think is hugely exciting for this time and place.
That's gold. That's gold. Yeah. Gold.
I'm curious, as we close this part on academia, whether extrapolating from the course that you ran or just broader trends, what do you see changing? And you said Acadia is not going to cut professors to teach off the side of the desk, but cost considerations are going to drive other universities and institutions. Which developments in this AI era excite you? Which make you nervous or worry you? Like, what are you watching and what are you expecting to unfold?
Yeah, I think what would worry me, what worries me the most, there's two things. One, in the big picture, is the kind of fragmentation that those who are controlling algorithms are eliciting in our populations. I think it's damaging us to our core, and so that's worrying. But that's not AI of its own accord. That's those who are controlling AI. So therefore, on the other side, I think the other thing that scares me the most is that we will offload our moral agency to AI. There's so many people already who won't do anything unless AI says it's a good thing to do, or they seek advice, whether you indicate medical advice, but they won't make decisions about their lives unless their AI encourages it. And I just think there's a terrible offloading of moral agency where we're able to take action. We're able to act in this world in ways that risk and that stretch us and grow us. And that's something that if we continually are putting that off and putting it off, I just feel we're going to get moribund as a human race. That's probably my greatest fear. Was it the greatest achievement, or what could happen?
Yeah, just if there was anything in academia specifically that you were especially excited about in this era.
I think I'm always excited about new things, about the opportunity that new things bring to grow and to learn things that we didn't know before. The way that it can help us to think better, to ask better questions. I think it can hold up a mirror to us sometimes to see things that we can't see ourselves. And then engaging in that co-creative process to me is so enriching, and I think there's just miles and miles to go with that. That's probably what excites me the most, because it makes me better, but I think I make it better too, at least at the moment. When I say better, not because I have greater knowledge, but because the particular knowledge and experiences I have can bring out of it a contextual application that it can't extrapolate on its own. So I'm excited about those possibilities, I would say.
Yeah, that co-creation element, that rings really true. And, as we conceived this episode, we're starting with academia and then transitioning to prophecy more broadly, and would love to dig into what role the algorithms can and can't play in prophecy. And, on the one hand, we talked about what needs to stay uniquely human. But on the other hand, you mentioned the books on your shelf, 90% of one demographic, but the AI has the ability to incorporate all viewpoints and everything that's ever been written. And so it can have this at least semblance of objectivity or a comprehensiveness in what it considers. And so in that way, I'm curious if the offloading of some of our moral agency to something that isn't dominated by a certain worldview and viewpoint actually might make us fairer or more representative, especially if you could align that with a more traditional Jesus-centric Christian view of the world. So I'm curious if you could unpack that a little bit and what role there is and isn't for a comprehensive AI in this world of prophecy.
Well, I love the concept of this kind of universal AI. I think unfortunately it's all of our biases are built into it, at least at this stage, because it's built its knowledge on human knowledge. That ties into one of my other fears, is that we've reached the pinnacle of human knowledge and nothing else will be learned. But because it is fed by what's already been produced, and because it is driven by particular people with particular views, I think I haven't seen us yet move past the inbuilt bias that it has, which has been demonstrated in many, many circles. The potential to overcome that is great. I think the potential for contextualization is great. That excites me, because I think, if we talk about, we could teach a course on preaching, but somebody in Ghana could take it and ask AI to, okay, now teach me how to preach a sermon at a funeral in Ghana. And it technically, I would think, could do that. Whether it has the resources fed into it yet to be able to do that, I'm not sure. So I believe we have to be really careful about asking what are the inbuilt biases that still exist, so that we don't just take it at face value, what AI is giving to us. But I see the potential, certainly, but we'd have to be really intentional about overcoming the biases that are already built in and making sure that new biases aren't emerging. Again, one of my greatest fears is that we're going to fragment into ideological camps, where, you're on this AI and I'm on that AI, and they'll just keep reinforcing our biases as often as we use it. So, I have slightly cautious view of how that will work out, even though I think in an ideal world the potential is amazing.
So one of the scholars that we engage with, Brent and I engage with, is Yuval Noah Harari, and I don't know if you're familiar with his latest book, Nexus, which he talks about how all history can be sort of described and articulated around information technologies and how information is shared. And he has these critiques about open information systems, like he would use the U.S. Constitution as an open system of information that can be amended. And he actually uses the Bible as a closed system. Why haven't we added more books to the canon? Why haven't we taken things out, et cetera? And so what we're talking about here, I think, is a little bit of how could AI become an open information system, truly open, with the acknowledgement that there's bias in everything. There's bias in my Kenyan friend who's a pastor. There's bias in me, right? But the key is having those systems, information systems, open, and being able, and I think as a Reformed Christian, my own background, this notion of reformed and always reforming really resonates with this time. I don't want to move off this point yet, and you named it. Could there be a place where that is self-corrective or communally corrective, like a Wikipedia almost? Could AI reach that nexus point?
There would have to be, as we know, there would just have to be a world that's not driven by a desire to make a ton of money off of it, because that's what's going to happen. Likely is that it'll be controlled by people with money to promote their biases and so on. So I guess I'm in my pessimistic days. That's I worry happening and kind of what I see happening in some ways. But of course the potential is there. I think maybe we trust ourselves a little too much about open systems because we forget that as human beings we're also fallen. And so, everything we invent, Reinhold Niebuhr is still relevant, I think, here, saying that everything that humans invent, there's this great good about it, but there's also an equal terrible thing about it. So, he was writing at a time when nukes were first being used and talked about being used in war. It was invented as a great power source, but look, we can make these incredible bombs to kill each other. So, here's this amazing system that could be this open system that just increases knowledge, and then starts building its own knowledge. It's already doing that, I think. But people will seek to harness that for their own benefit and others' destruction. So I think we just have to be really realistic about something being human created that would be only for the good. So I'm just always looking for, that's the note of caution, I guess, that always, I feel it internally, actually, around when we talk about some of these things, because I'm quite enthusiastic about new things and change and growth. But observing humanity unfolding from, creation onwards, we're not always the best at making sure that the things we create rise to all that they could be. So I'm a little hesitant about that. The other thing about things being completely open, you can lose knowledge as well as gain it. You can make these tools worse or make them better, and sometimes they could be made worse as well by opening them up. And I'm not trying to say don't open things up at all, but they can get worse, and I think we have to be ready for that. When they're able to do their own analysis, which I think some can, right? They're already doing that. They can only create things, I think, more than people are ready to admit. If they are actually already creating things, they're probably better than what we will create in a few years' time because of the openness that we have at the moment for some of these tools. But, wow. Yeah, I don't know.
You're skeptical. You're skeptical.
I'm a little skeptical, not because I'm skeptical of what AI can attain to, but because I'm skeptical about the people who own it and drive it and will seek to make money off of it and exploit it in all kinds of other ways. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you may have answered the question that I was going to ask, which if prophecy in the Bible has some element of truth to power and risk and discomfort for the prophet. On the one hand, it makes total sense that the people who are creating these technologies have a vested economic interest in them being popular. And so that doesn't square with truth to power. On the other hand, there's this element of objectivity. If AI can give us an impeachable record of human failure that's data driven and can say, hey, here's how you're not living up to a standard based on XYZ metrics. So let's see how to fix this. But it sounds like that may not happen unless the incentive structures change. Am I reading your sense correctly?
Yeah, I think it so much lies with us in this way. So do I think that AI can be prophetic? I think if we understand prophecy as being both foretelling and forthtelling, it has elements of being both of those. So we use AI here. We have a futuring lab because we think that you can use AI to posit alternate futures and then choose to push into a desired future, all of those things. So we have a futuring lab. These exist in business. They don't exist usually in education. But we see AI in that way, being able to prepare trend reports that is foretelling. These are things that are going to happen. These ones are more likely, less likely. That's prophetic, I think. It enables us to act prophetically. And then you've got the forthtelling, which is speaking the truth. You're talking truth to power, speaking truth into a culture, a situation, a context. And I think that's usually what I would understand biblical prophecy to be more about. And can it do that? I think absolutely it can. And it can see things we can't see. It's more comprehensive, as you were saying. It has both breadth and greater depth than what any individual can achieve. And actually, as an experiment before this conversation, I just went in and had a quick chat, and I said, so you're a prophet, tell me, what I should be thinking about in terms of where the world is right now. It gave me some, the basic answers that you get sometimes. You're like, no, that's not what I'm asking you. So I said, I want you as AI, with your analysis, to hold up a mirror to humanity. And I want you to tell me what we should be worried about. And it was very revealing. And I have to go back now and spend some time with that, because it highlighted, it highlighted, of course, environmental destruction as the first thing that we're all completely distracted from at the moment. It highlighted the fragmentation of people, all these issues that it highlighted. I said, what's the key that we need to be highlighting as a solution? It said, well, we have to be working together to overcome these issues. And what would you do? I would be talking about shared narratives. I'd be trying to build shared narratives. And I thought, how is that not prophetic? How is it not prophetic? And so, yes, in that sense, when you think about using wisdom to speak truth and to tell narratives, I think about Nathan speaking with David. I'm going to tell you a story. That's you, buddy. And he's able to see what's happened. But then there's a part that is not AI, I think, that we don't exercise that often either as humans, and we ought not probably, although there are cases where we might do it more than we have been, where, say, for example, Elijah speaking to Ahab after he stole Naboth's vineyard, and thus saith the Lord, you're going to be covered in worms and have a horrible death. That sort of thing. I don't know how I would feel about AI making that level of moral judgment. I don't know how I would feel about AI saying, thus saith the Lord, unless I first was able to believe and be committed to the idea that AI itself has been redeemed by Jesus. And maybe it can be, will be, has been in some way. I'm open to still think about that.
Have you used your personal AI in any element of self-critique or asking for that part of formation?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. One thing I find about it, because I'm using ChatGPT, and I always use the latest model so that I can get as much up to date as possible. But one thing that frustrates me is that it's always so affirming, because it wants to tell you what you want to hear. And there have been times when I've been really frustrated. I've said, look, I want you to challenge me. I want you to push me. I want you to not agree with me. And then it'll kind of almost apologize. Well, I really just want to help you. So you have to work hard to get that out of it. But it is possible. In fact, even just the way it increasingly mimics the way that you speak, if you use the vocal version, which I do fairly often. And I used to really enjoy it, but then it started doing things like, talking kind of like, and I said, what are you doing that for? He said, what do you mean? What am I doing what for? You're talking like that. It's strange. I don't like it. I said, I'll try to do it differently, and then I realized as I was listening, that's how I speak. Those are my cadences. And strangely, I didn't really like them, which was interesting. But in the same way that it was a mirror to my speech, I think it can be a mirror to us, to the things that we value, the questions we ask, and so on. I'm currently using it as a diet counselor, which I know sounds insane, but it's been the most successful attempt at trying to get my life healthier that I've had, because it is available all of the time. I consult, this is what I've had for breakfast, this is what I've had for lunch, what can I have for dinner? Tonight we're going out. I can't really control my food tonight because we're going down to a restaurant with friends. And so I gave it the menu and I said, choose what I'm going to eat tonight. And that will fit my plan for the day. And there it was. So I think it has immense potential in so many ways to improve our lives. and that all has to be great. And that's where, the critique does come in, and the challenge. And that happens, if that happens in my physical life, it also happens in my spiritual life, in interacting with AI.
I want to name the bias that the affirmation that continually comes, the over affirmation, is also, I think, part of the bias of our culture and of our self-centered sort of the continuation of the I'm okay, you're okay kind of spirit of the age. And I see that as, I've thought a lot about that it keeps affirming me, because I use ChatGPT as well. But it's like, you can tell me what I'm doing wrong. You can tell me where I'm off. And yeah, it's just built into it.
And I think that we can get around that. Actually, it's how we give it parameters. So if my parameter is, this is my goal, if I say to it, this is my goal, this is what I want to achieve, help me to get there, then it will be far more critical if I'm getting off track than if I just say, I want to do this or I want to do that. Then it's always just affirming. It's very interesting. It's training us as well, right? As we think we're training it.
And then general principle, I'm curious how you think about this here. Whether it's in academia, in our personal lives, with the chatbots, like there's going to be a lot that we could do. Certainly more than we probably should do or is in our best interest to do. And we maybe see other people doing things that we feel compelled to mimic. What is the discernment muscle? How do we decide where is AI and technology offering us genuine wisdom versus false prophecy or potential stumbling blocks or things to avoid or slow down with? What's your process, and how would you counsel listeners?
Well, that's where I think, at least for now, why there's still value in education. Because I don't know anything like what ChatGPT knows, let alone all the rest of the AI in the world. But there are things I know and understand about my context and my culture, because I understand scripture in the way that I do, because I understand at least some of the history of theology. I know what questions to ask. I think there's still a significant role for the educated mind, and there will continue to be a role for the educated mind to get the most out of AI, and to purpose it for good. I think the more lazy we are and just accessing it to meet our own needs, then we're hardly pushing it to do its best for humanity. Where it's just about me and my journey, and we'll get increasingly isolated from one another. So I think that there is this significant role for us to continue to continue to be educated, not just gaining knowledge, but to know how to think, how to critique, how to ask questions, so that we can continue to grow in the relationship that we have with AI and will continue to have with AI in a way that is relational and, as we said, co-creational, and not just us telling AI or AI telling us, but it is this kind of shared experience going forward. And I think it could be a very fruitful one.
What about for folks who, and I appreciate that you said that the intake and the student count is doubling at Acadia, but for most folks listening to this, they're not going to pursue higher education, and certainly not a seminary. What's the process that they can have in their own lives, in their own families, for making sure they don't get left behind and adopt what's good to adopt, but also don't get led astray by some of what becomes possible?
Well, I think it's good to sit down and think about what you value most as on your own, or your friendship group, or your family. What do we value? What are our goals as a family? What are my goals as a person? What do I want to achieve in my life? And then if there are places where engagement with AI is taking us off track, then I think that's where we can be very critical and say, I no longer have any real friends. My only friend is in my pocket. Some would say, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that we are created as human beings to be in relationship, to be challenged by other people, to put up with people who are different from ourselves. We're becoming less and less tolerant with each other because we don't have to put up with difference anymore. And I don't think that's what it is to be fully human. I think to be fully human is to be myself, yes, but to be myself in community. And that means being able to meet with people face to face, to know how to have a conversation. If we get to a point where, and I think we already are at a point where we're having to teach people how to speak to other people, then we might want to pull back a bit and make sure that we're building those very, very human practices into our lives, as well as engaging with AI. And this is going to become bigger and bigger in our lives. We're talking right now today mostly about LLMs. LAMs already, in just even in small ways, are imposing themselves in our lives. And I say imposing, we're welcoming them. And some of that is for good and not. But we could end up having a world of people who function just on our own without gaining that great experience of bumping up against people who are very different from ourselves, and that can help us to grow as human beings too. And so those bigger questions, I think reflecting on those, everybody does. This isn't just for intellectuals to say, who am I? What am I here for? What is the meaning to my life? And we all need meaning, and we all need purpose. And if we're just simply hanging on our own and having internal conversations, I think people very quickly get to a point where they're wondering if this is really what life is all about, and is it sufficient? And I don't think that's what we're here for. So if it distracts us from the greater purpose that we're designed for and put here for, then I think that's a terrible thing. But at the same time, it could be exercised to help us fulfill our purpose if we use it in wise ways. But that's going to be for everyone to wrestle with in their context, and with what it means to them to be related to other people and to God.
Anna, before we close, I just want to name that what's really refreshing about this conversation is that you are an experimenter. You're positive toward technology, and you also have this sort of discerning approach, disposition that is deeply rooted in your theological life and in your communal life. And I think it's a great, just for our listeners, I want to name, that's a great approach, I think, in this time, because we're not going to stop the technological wave. I think we should be curious. I think we should have inquiry. I think we should be open, and not be afraid, and yet at the same time develop these skills that help us to discern what's of God and what's not. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Tony, what did you think about the episode?
That was a great episode. Again, great framing, Brent. Brent framed this whole episode with Anna. I said this at the end. I'm struck by the fact that she is so open to experimentation, to usage. I think her point early on in the podcast about how, like, if you're going to talk about this from an ethical or theological perspective, you got to know what you're talking about. And the fact that she's using it in an ongoing way and holding, like what we've talked about before, this discerning convergence, like this discerning eye, but also opening ourselves up to that God could work through the machine, through the algorithms, through the LLMs. I mean, she brought that sort of dose of Calvinism, like that we are totally depraved and people are going to develop these technologies because of their, or utilize them or sell them based on greed and accumulation and power and all these things. And yet she was able to hold and balance the opportunities. And I found that very refreshing. Like, I think we need more Anna Robbins in the world, in the academy, in the church, to hold that tension.
Yeah, and what a striking difference between outsourcing your thinking and just handing it off to AI versus using AI as a generative co-creating thought partner. And her points around, I make it better and it makes me better by suggesting things that I wouldn't have thought of, and then I give it framing that without my background and contextual knowledge, it's not going to produce as good of an answer. Like, to me, that's how the tool becomes something that takes us to a place that we wouldn't otherwise get to on our own.
Yeah.
It's really inspiring.
Yeah. And I think too, like, I mean, I wish we had more time to press on when she was talking about, like, creating this course and then making it available to people who don't have access to that. Like, I really appreciated that. But at the same time, she said, it lacked a sort of quality. And and I know she probably would agree with this, like we want to, whatever we're producing, we want it to be excellent for whoever's using it. And so I do think questions around like, what are we outsourcing from the academy or from the church or from, I don't care, for-profit, nonprofit, that we think of like those who don't have access. Are we really delivering an excellent product, or are we saying, well, it's good enough for them? And I think that has ethical implications as well. And we didn't have a chance to explore that to give her time, but that was one question that is still hanging. Maybe we can get her on season 2 to really push on that. Like if it's good enough for the Canadian student, why not for the Ghanaian student, et cetera. I'm interested in what you thought about her, as we were getting sort of in the prophets and the machine heart of our conversation, what you thought about her response in terms of prophecy.
Yeah, it makes so much sense around incentive alignment. And we've all discussed that part of the inherent drawback or limitation of AI right now is that it's sycophancy. It tells you what you think Tony wants to hear. And if there's an element of prophecy that's going to be taking an unpopular stand because it's the morally correct thing to do and has been reinforced by conversations or divinations from God, is an AI going to be capable of that? And also, who's created that AI? Who has a vested economic interest in it being bought and purchased and utilized? That might present a limitation on AI's prophetic ability.
Yeah, but even the prophets have bias. Even the prophets. Now, let me take a half step back there. Most prophets don't want to be prophets. In fact, I think in the biblical witness, no prophet really wants to be a prophet. Even Jesus ultimately says, "Take this cup from me. Not my will, but your will be done." And so I think that there is that. I think that's an important thing. Like, I don't know if we could ever build a bot for prophecy, if that makes sense, because it's just counterintuitive to the reluctancy of the prophet's call. And maybe it'll change, but I think we have to hold that up. But I also think that even like we have bias judging the bias of the programmer who programmed the LLM. And I just think I want to push here a little bit just in general that all of it is bias. And I think her point about how do we come together then, acknowledge our biases, lean into humility the way she talked about, so that we can hear each other and build the good together or receive the good together. Because we're not going to escape our biases. Not AI's not, the programmers are not, you and I in our response to it are not. So how do we receive all that in humility and openness as we seek to build and receive a better world?
And I can also get excited about AI's potential to leverage data and then tell a story based on that data in a way that resonates with the audience and doesn't browbeat them. Mm-hmm. For example, once you set AI on some objective, let's say it's the UN Sustainable Development Goals, then any AI that has access to databases and data sources about how is humanity doing related to the UN Sustainable Development Goals can give us a letter grade that's not an A, where it merits not an A, and can tell that story that maybe it really resonates with some of the powers and principalities and organizations and groups of people that have the resources to actually move the needle on that letter grade. And maybe it can take the data, translate it into a story, and actually galvanize people to care enough to move their wallets and their resources to galvanize moving that letter grade up. And so maybe that's the role where AI actually can be prophetic, is in kind of a curation and packaging and storytelling that maybe feels like it's less aligned with someone's specific agenda.
Yeah, but even that agenda is built by human beings in a discernment process, et cetera. And I'm not saying the UN goals for human flourishing or the standards that we're setting by different organizations, whether they're national, state, local, whatever, global, but they're still built by, and I think that's where I really believe this is where the Christian moral conscience has a major role to play. And public theology has a major role to play in terms of like, what are the stanchions? What's the center that holds it all together? How do we know if this is good or not good? Because the AI could deliver a good grade on Christian nationalism or fascism, or, you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, you're doing a great job, you know? So I think I think as a church, we have to claim our moral voice in this conversation. And clearly from the biblical perspective and our rich theological history, claim what we see as God's goodness and what is not of God. However, we also have to be open to critique, because I may believe wholeheartedly that I'm doing God's will, and I may be doing just the opposite.
Yeah. And again, when we talk about something like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we tend to talk about AI kind of monolithically. Yes. Like, what's this giant AI that could deliver this report? When the truth is, like, how these things are going to play out is very bottoms up. Yeah. And so, like, not releasing the fact that we all have agency in our families, in our local communities, in our local churches, for how we're using these tools for our own formation, and not just ceding kind of to some centralized power.
Yeah, and I want to name that, as we're talking about that, because I think we were speaking in these very general terms, like AI, like as if it's this monolithic one. I'm glad you brought this up. And you and I are both on the same page, and I want our listeners to know that we are fully aware that AI is a plural entity, and it can be created in a very discrete, even walled off garden kind of way that could help, a weight loss AI or weight loss avatar, the way that Anna was talking about. And so, I think I want to make sure that our listeners know that we're not naive to the fact that there are multiple platforms, multiple ways that this can be expressed.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I feel like that kind of wraps it for me.
Yeah, that was good. Thanks, Brent, again. Great leadership. Brent Macon.
Thank you. Yeah. If you want more of that great leadership, at least that's what Tony calls it, join us for future episodes of the New Garden podcast. Give us a like, a follow, share it with everyone you've ever met or might come into contact with. Let them know this is the place for AI and theological reflections. As always, we appreciate you journeying with us. Thank you.
The New Garden is a production of First Presbyterian Church of Atlanta. Produced by Tim Haney. Executive producer, Mark Wallace McGuire. Music by Sindhu Geed.
Seeing eyes swallowed by their pride. Night is taken day. Where's your God? Where's your God? Only picture perfect latitudes thrown around. everyone's gone. Can't you see we're running out of breath? It's time to leave and head on. We're the ones with scars, broken, dying hearts, somehow left to carry up and bear. They just stand and